people are doing. So I know it's been a while, but yeah, it's finally time to take a look at the S23 Ultra's review. And you know, the weird thing about this one is just that we already know what we're in for with the S23 Ultra. At least the major stuff, you know, like, yeah, you're paying a lot of money and you're getting an insanely good smartphone. Let's face it, it is very good, and you're also getting a ton of features. Basically every feature you could honestly ask for. There are some small exceptions here and there, but for the most part you're getting everything and then some. And in this review, you're basically gonna feel like I'm nitpicking a lot, and that's kind of the whole point, because you're paying so much that even the smallest flaws, something that maybe not everyone will even be affected by, it's gonna play a massive role here. Yeah, let's start off with the design, and I think this is one of the bigger flaws that the S23 Ultra has. And I'm only talking about the camera module here, because let's face it, when you're paying so damn much, I think that we deserve a beautiful looking camera module, and this it's not gonna cut it. It looks nice, it looks fine, it doesn't look ugly, but it also doesn't exactly look stunning. It doesn't exactly scream like, yeah, I'm a $1,300 device. Even though, you know, the form factor that we have, the square off design, yeah, I really like it. I'm a huge fan of it. I mean, overall it looks nice, but the camera module, I think it doesn't fit in. That's the big issue that I'm having here. It just doesn't feel like it belongs on a device like this. But then let's move on to the front of the device, and here I guess I would say Samsung made some interesting and potentially really good decisions. And well, this is just a roundabout way of saying that the curves this time around on the S23 Ultra, they are at their absolute minimum. I mean that quite literally, because it's very slight. I would say just enough to give us that premium look and feel of a flagship, to give us some form of curve that really just sits right in our hands, but also not cause any of the issues, at least for the most part. But yeah, moving on, let's talk about the display, and there are some interesting things here. So we have a fantastic looking display. You're not going to be complaining about the display, not actively. When you look at this display, it's big, it's beautiful, it's sharp as hell. I mean, it's got Quad HD+, it's got our 120Hz, it's basically got everything you could honestly ask for. But let's face it, when you're paying so much money, the phone has to have everything you expect, obviously, and then some. The problem is that I honestly expected Samsung to really give us a massive boost in brightness this time around, because especially the iPhones, they have, I believe, around a 2000 nit display, and essentially they are insanely bright. And so the S23 Ultra, I really hope that they would at least equalize the playing field, if not actually give us even more brightness. That would have been quite something, but we don't really get that. Another thing I really have to point out at this point is that yes, we get good HDR content, we get very nice HDR10 Plus and HDR10, but I really hoped that we would have gotten Dolby Vision. Dolby Vision is basically the standard for Netflix, and if you watch Netflix, Dolby Vision would have been quite nice. And honestly, in my case, it would have been very nice indeed to have Dolby Vision instead of just a plain regular HDR10 that we get at the moment. So a very small nitpick. I don't think it matters to a lot of people, at least, but you know, it was something that I had hoped for and it didn't really happen. So just saying. Now, another little complaint that I had is with the fingerprint scanner. Now I know it's not exactly in the display department, but it's in a similar realm. So essentially it's fine. I mean, it's basically fast enough and accurate enough, but once again, you're paying a lot of money. We cannot just be satisfied with enough. Now is there? Because there's something better out there. That's my big point here. I would not have complained about this last year all that much, but with the existence of the Vivo X80 Pro, the massive, super fast, super accurate fingerprint scanner that we have on that one, I mean, everything else pales in comparison, including the S23 Ultra. In my case, I switched from the X80 Pro to the S23 Ultra, and immediately I started to miss the fingerprint scanner, because you know, I used to just take that thing out of the pocket and have it unlocked by the time I looked at it. That's impossible with the S23 Ultra, at least in my experience, because the size of the fingerprint scanner on the X80 Pro was really that massive that you didn't even have to look at it. And since we were just talking about the display here, I think we should also touch on the speakers, which is just honestly so impressive on the S23 Ultra. it's a beautiful experience on the S23. I mean, I knew that they were good. They had gotten a little bit better compared to last year, but I didn't expect such a massive improvement. I mean, the biggest improvement that I've had is not just in the volume department. We have more volume, by the way, but it's also in the overall clarity of the sound that comes out of it. What I'm saying is that when I started watching stuff on the S23 Ultra, I could hear far more stuff that were happening in the background than I previously could on other smartphones. Even the S22 Ultra, which had fantastic speakers, but at the end of the day, these are the best speakers that I've ever heard of in any smartphone thus far. Nothing even comes close. That's how a lot of other aspects of the S23 Ultra should be. But it's not. Thankfully, that's not the case with performance this time around. And it's almost an upgrade, but I don't think we should consider it an upgrade as such, because Samsung was trailing behind on this department. The problem that many of you already know about is that we have had these Exynos versions from Samsung and Snapdragon variants. Essentially from the S20 Ultra, maybe like the 2020 period, the Exynos variants really just fell off the chart and they didn't even compare to the Snapdragon variants. Samsung tried to fix that issue, but they couldn't really get there, and now they have finally dropped it. They should have done that when they saw the problems with the S20 Ultra, and that really matters, especially at this price point. And this also really counts towards the efficiency of the smartphone too. The battery life on the Snapdragon S23 Ultra is incredible, and you don't have to worry about terrible battery life ruining your experience with Exynos, because it's not there anymore. I mean that quite literally. The battery life is insane on this. I'm getting like 6.5 to 7 hours. That's how much battery life I'm getting, and in my experience, that's massive. That is huge. I honestly don't even see myself getting to like 30% of the battery most days, because I don't use my phone for that long in a single day, and I always charge at night. So essentially, you're not gonna have any issues with battery life either. Now, there is a bit of a nitpick in battery life. Now, I don't really want to, because it didn't bother me personally, but I have to state it. So if you do want to use the S23 Ultra for 2 whole days without worrying about charging in between at all, you might run into some issues, because in my experience, the standby time on the S23 Ultra, it's still an issue. It's gotten better, a lot better compared to what we had in previous years, but still, I can tell you right now, you're not going to be able to use this quite as well, because through the night, you're going to lose a lot of battery just by, not having the phone plugged in, just by having the phone idly sit there. And so with all of that wrapped up, now you know that there are small issues, obviously, with the S23 Ultra. Here and there, every now and then, something or the other pops up. But the cameras, that's where things get very interesting about the S23, because we have had a pretty significant hardware upgrade. That's one of the few hardware changes that we have had on the S23 Ultra. I'm talking about the main camera, of course. We have a larger sensor, 200 megapixels, which the number doesn't matter. plain and simple, that's the best way to put it. That 200 megapixel number, don't even believe that it's not going to give you anything particularly special. The sensor itself, the upgrade that we have had, that's the significant part. And in that regard, we actually get a lot of good stuff. Obviously, the main camera stuff has improved, whether it's normal photos, night mode, portraits, all of that stuff has improved. We have had far better processing. I mean, white balance and all that stuff, so much better. I had this terrible issue with the S22 Ultra giving me a lot of magenta whenever I'm shooting in warm lit conditions. That's all gone now. It's completely fixed on the S23 Ultra, and I'm so glad for that. One major thing that I really liked about the S23 Ultra is that they are giving us a 50 megapixel mode, which in my experience, it's the way to go if you want high-res images, but also you want your photos to have good enough HDR, good enough noise reduction, and so on and so forth. Just nice processing and high-res. 50 megapixels is incredible on this. If you do want to go to 200, you can, but it doesn't really give us all that much detail. I've tested out in multiple camera comparisons. Every single time, the difference is negligible, to say the very least. You're not going to get 4 times more detail just because you're jumping the numbers here. And this new main sensor actually also helps out with 8K video. We'll get to that in a moment, but I do have a major issue with the S23 Ultra's ultrawide camera. Now, in case you're wondering, the 3x zoom works really well. You get amazing portraits out of it. You're not gonna have any problems with that. The 10x zoom, similar fashion. The photos look great. Everything just works quite nice, seamlessly. No issues whatsoever in that regard. The ultrawide, that's where we have problems. And we have had the problem with the ultrawide camera forever now because the sensor is just not good enough. It's just not, plain and simple. I really hoped that at this point in time, after so long, Samsung would have upgraded the ultrawide along with the main camera. Like, yes, the main camera needed an upgrade, but the ultrawide needed a much bigger upgrade. And that's the sole reason why the ultrawide cameras on like the OnePlus 11, the Vivo X80 Pro from last year, the Pixel 7 Pro from last year, all of them perform like 100 times better compared to the ultrawide on this. Yes, of course, when you're taking normal daylight photos, when there's a lot of light, you're not going to face the issue, but the light gathering capacity on the ultrawide camera, it's just not good enough, and it suffers so much in night mode. Basically, every other camera that I have lying around at this very moment, they all perform better with their ultrawide cameras at night. Very unfortunate, and you know, it's more than about time that Samsung finally fixes this huge issue that we have had for such a very long time now. But now let us finally talk about video. And yes, this is essentially the best videography camera that you have amongst Android smartphones, at least thus far. I haven't tested it out completely against the Xiaomi 13 Pro yet. Of course, I'll get to that in a moment, but yeah, I think that you're not going to have any issues with it unless you expect it to be as good as the iPhone, which it is not. It doesn't have the same level of quality, it doesn't have the same level of video processing as such as opposed to the iPhone. Now, there are certain things that it can do that the iPhone cannot. Of course, there's stuff like the 10x zoom, there's stuff like 8K, and so let's talk about the 8K. The 8K is finally usable. It's weird because Samsung was like one of the very first few people to introduce 8K. They're also the very last when it comes to just refining it. And then another major thing that Samsung finally addressed is Super Steady. The video quality itself has improved by a massive amount, and that's a big deal because it finally makes the Super Steady mode usable. It finally makes it worth using for stabilization because the drawback, which is a loss in quality, is not nearly as much. And so yeah, video it's great on the S23 Ultra. You know, one thing that still bothers me, and this goes for every single smartphone, not just the S23 Ultra, more so for the S23, mainly because, you know, it costs a ridiculous amount of money, so I expect more from the S23 just by default. But I'm talking about slow motion here. The 1080p 240 that we're still stuck with, it's ridiculous because I can guarantee that phones like these can probably push either QHD 240 or 4K 120 easily. Hell, we had 4K 120 a few years ago from OnePlus, and I don't know why OnePlus stopped giving us 4K 120, but it's about time. Like, 4K 120 should be easy on smartphones like this, on the iPhones, on the S23 Ultra. So anyways, I digress. Let's finally talk about the S Pen. There's really no complaint here. It's exactly what you expect. Either you use it or you don't use it. To be entirely honest, the only time I really use it is either when I'm sketching a little bit here and there, just doodles mostly at this point, and of course while I'm editing the thumbnails. You know, at that point the S Pen kind of becomes indispensable, at least in my case. But let's face it, if you really care about an S Pen, you don't really have any other choice. The S23 Ultra is the only smartphone that is going to give you an S Pen in this day and age. No other smartphone has it, so it's kind of your default option at this point if you really care about it. That's kind of the big thing here. Now, when it comes to software or the UI, personally, in my experience, this is the best amongst all the other Android skins. Hell, I even prefer this to stock Android. I know that's like a sin or whatever when it comes to tech YouTubers, but the main point here is that I personally love customization. Stock Android just doesn't have enough for me. It has a lot. I like it for that, but it's just not as good as the One UI on the S23 Ultra. Now, one last thing that I just wanted to address, it's not exactly a complaint yet, I guess, because this is like a growing trend that I've noticed among smartphone cameras. Essentially, we have things like the X80 Pro, which has nice natural colors. Now, I don't know how many people actually care about this, but if you want natural photos, if you want realistic colors, you go for the X80 Pro. That's kind of like been my recommendation through and through. Now, needless to say, we don't get that on the S23 Ultra now, do we? We don't have any stylistic options. Even if you wanted especially stylish looking images, or maybe sort of artistic looking images with like really nice punchy contrast, stuff like that, then at this point I would actually recommend the Xiaomi 13 Pro for its Leica color options that it has with the Leica Authentic and the Leica Vibrant. That phone has its issues with Leica Authentic and Leica Vibrant, but I'm just saying that Samsung needs something that will act as sort of like an identity. When you look at an image, you want to be able to identify that is from the S23 Ultra. At this point, of course, nothing really like that exists, but I'm really hoping that Samsung adds something like that, at least in the next generation, if not via some software update. I doubt it's gonna happen, but just saying. So at the end of the day, is the S23 Ultra worth it? Well, there are a lot of small things that have been improved on the S23, whether it's in the camera's processing, the main sensor, and then of course we have had the insane improvement in the speakers. It's a very underrated feature, the speakers. Not a lot of people are really talking about it, but it is so damn good. Do I recommend it? I mean, yeah, sure. This is basically what you're gonna go for if you do have that level of money lying around and you do want majority of the features that this thing has to offer. So with that said, I do hope you guys enjoyed, found this very helpful, because at the end of the day, the S23 Ultra, it has a lot of improvements that have happened under the hood, and it's important that you know that. But there are also a lot of things, once again, under the hood that really needs to be improved. There's still a lot of things that Samsung needs to do to make it that perfect smartphone that is going to cost you an arm and a leg. It still costs an arm and a leg, but it's not perfect yet. So I'll be seeing you guys soon enough with many more videos to come. Cheers.